responses of private institutions and academic institutions, as well as government institutions towards handling the pandemic. On top of that is we have already encountered some ways on how to use information systems towards combating the spread of the fear and that can be brought in by the pandemic. The public health crisis of the past 3 months has greatly accelerated the use of and dependence of people on softwares, applications, and information systems. And one of the hardest hit sectors of our society is the education sector. And today, schools are in a quandary and in search of effective systems to deliver their very important yet basic service. So for our talk today, our talk will deal with learning how our schools can stay connected with our students with remote learning through Microsoft Teams, and how our schools can continue learning beyond the four walls of the classroom. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Marik Neri, and I am with the Institute of Mathematics in UP Diliman. Our speaker for today is currently in charge of the education partner ecosystem of Microsoft Philippines. He has a consistent track record of success in working in the information technology industry and has been with the company for the past 5 years. Prior to his stint in Microsoft, he worked for one of the largest conglomerates in the Philippines. He has a strong education background with a Master of Business Administration from the Asian Institute of Management and a degree in finance from De La Salle University, Manila. He has been involved in philanthropic activities, as he previously served as one of the board of directors of the Junior Chamber International Manila, a nonprofit organization that focuses on leadership, development, and charitable activities. So I request you to let us welcome our speaker for this morning. Our first speaker, Mr. Paulo Balinas of Enterprise Channel for Education, Microsoft Philippines.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sir Marek, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you to the Computing Society of the Philippines for having Microsoft as one of your speakers today. So I'll just share my screen. Let me know if everyone can see it, and I'll proceed. No? So can someone confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, it is
okay.
Online.
Okay, good. So good morning, everyone. Once again, my name is Paulo Balinas. I work for the education team of Microsoft Philippines, and I'm very excited to be invited here today to talk about, the different initiatives that Microsoft is doing in helping schools adapt to our new normal. So today, I divided my talk into two parts. The first part would discuss more on the why, the evolving trends, and how it is reshaping our education landscape. And the second half would give you a practical walkthrough in terms of the specific tool that you can use to quickly adapt to our new normal. So, I want to talk about remote learning, right? So how can we use and leverage technology to stay connected through our specific tool called Microsoft Teams and Office 365? So before I start, I just wanted to, highlight a very good quote from our CEO, Satya Nadella, wherein our industry does not respect tradition, it only respects innovation. I think technology has a huge impact in various industries. Industries that were once stable and very profitable are now put at temporary risk, such as the airline industry, the hotel and accommodation industry have all been put at risk mainly because of the pandemic. And schools have also been heavily impacted with the recent crisis, suspending schools to until August 24. But again, it serves as an opportunity as well for schools to rethink the way that we actually deliver education to our students. And it's an opportunity for us to actually use technology as an enabler for us to go beyond the four walls of the classroom. If you noticed, the government has announced suspension of classes, cancellation of classes, even as extreme as not having class at all until a vaccine is found. But if you were to look at it, if you were to follow the traditional way of delivering education, I think that's the most logical way of doing it to avoid the risk of the spread of the pandemic. But when you think about it, with technology, can you use technology to still deliver the same quality of education beyond the physical space of a classroom? So before I move on to the talk, like I mentioned, the first half is really discussing the why and the different trends that are reshaping the education landscape. And from these trends, it helps you understand like how can you reposition yourselves to set yourselves up for success in the years to come. So there's 7 key trends done by a study of Microsoft. The first one is a newfound openness to cloud technologies. I think this is very evident now, wherein in the past, a lot of schools that I used to talk to who were preferring to have on-premise software are now starting to rethink their strategy, mainly because of the need for business continuity. So the great thing about cloud technology is, regardless of where you may be, the education can still happen. In terms of maintenance and whatnot, it's lower. You're moving from a capital expenditure to more of an operating expenditure. So the key insight there is more and more schools are starting to look more into cloud technology and are more open and receptive to adapting it in their own respective institutions. The second key insight or trend was, the pandemic helped us resurface the current challenges that our current school systems face. When I talk to a lot of schools had challenges in terms of pursuing their enrollment, not because of the hesitance of parents to actually enroll, but mainly also due to the fact that they don't have the right systems in place in terms of are they able to conduct an online enrollment? Are they able to accept online payment? So because of this, it's a awakening call for schools to actually think, are there certain business operations that we can use certain technologies to make it more efficient and resilient in case that, this kind of scenario happens again in the future. The third one is, I think this is going to be a major shift in terms of the mindset of teachers, is those professors or teachers who may have been quite, quite avoiding in terms of the use of technology in the classroom. More and more educators are being more open in using technology in the classroom, just to continue, beyond the four walls of the classroom. So even if we have the more experienced professors are starting to be more open in conducting virtual classes, hosting online assessments and whatnot. So because of this, educators are in need to reskill themselves, especially in terms of their digital literacy. The fourth one, which I think is very evident, technology has been disrupting the business sector for years and years, and the business sector has been evolving rapidly. The challenge is with this evolving industries in business, there's also a parallel need for schools to adjust the content and curriculum to ensure that by the time that the student graduates, they are workplace ready and employable and have the right skill sets to perform uh, the needed task. So again, there's a shift in terms of the workforce requirements. So they're looking for more candidates who are more digital literate, tech savvy, and know how to analyze data for business decision making. So again, it's insight that schools may want to look into as well in terms of realigning the content curriculum to the industry standards or what are being looked for in the market. The fifth one is the growing optimization of health and safety. So I think this pandemic has emphasize the need to ensure proper health systems, not only in the business sector, but as well as in schools, to ensure parents that that their students are safe, that no virus would be spread within the campus. Because of this, more and more schools are starting to look into technology such as, how can we automate temperature checks? How can we use data to predict whether or not this certain student has a chance to actually, you know, uh, spread a certain illness or whatnot. So basically, this insight is more and more schools are given high emphasis in health, and how can they use technology to avoid certain pandemic from spreading within the campus. The sixth one, whenever I talk to schools, is I think a lot of schools agree that the need to shift to a blended learning approach. The challenge is that not all students or teachers may have access to a device. Others may share a device within their own household. So because of this, it's schools are starting to rethink how can we come up with innovative and cost-efficient ways to provide devices. So the good thing about that is there are a lot of solutions out there. Later I'll show you that can work with as simple as a smartphone. So I've talked to some schools who actually adopted, a mobile strategy, wherein they access the content through their mobile device. And the last one is there's increasing pressure for university partnerships with research firms and healthcare providers. So I think this is a huge opportunity for educations to realign with healthcare providers, in a sense that you can be the academe partner in terms of conducting research on a certain illness or a certain medical, what they call this, medical topic, right? So schools around the globe are starting to partner with, government, accessing open data, partnering with healthcare providers in conducting academic research, in helping look for solution for these health issues. So these are the seven key insights or trends that are reshaping the education landscape. Hence, over the next few years, we expect this to be the entire education system to be completely revamped. And we expect to see major shifts happen in the education industry. But of course, given all of these trends, whenever I talk to schools, it's not simply about buying a device, buying an online platform. In order to implement a lasting and effective change, the way we talk to schools is really in a more holistic approach. So Microsoft, what we did is we developed a framework called the Education Transformation Framework. So this framework was based on global best practice in terms of how digital transformation, the right way to implement digital transformation in schools. So the way we segmented it is there's four key buckets that we identified that are critical for you to implement effective and lasting change. So I'll tackle it one by one. The first one is leadership and policy. I think the biggest challenge, the first hurdle that a school needs to overcome is really getting the buy-in of management to see that this is the right way to go. The need for us to digitize certain systems, and identifying that champion who would be your change maker within the institution. The main challenge, if you do not have the buy-in of the management as well as a champion identified, there is no accountability in terms of who would drive, who is the main person accountable driving change. And at the same time, apart from the buy-in of the leadership and identifying a champion, it's also important to implement clear policies and guidelines so that schools have end goal in mind. What I noticed, a lot of schools may have different systems across the entire campus. So that may be an approach, but the direction of where you want to go is best implemented if you have a singular endpoint in mind or goal in mind, and identify clear policies and guidelines towards achieving that goal. The second one, the second pillar is about modern teaching and learning. So I think this is very relevant, especially in the schools, mainly because highlighting the modern. So like I mentioned earlier, technology has disrupted various industries, and schools are put in a position wherein there is a need to reassess, whether the content and curriculum being taught in school are still relevant in terms of the growing and fastest growing industries. Key trivia, the fastest growing industry in our world today is technology. So, in terms of the pay and the number of jobs available over the next few years, they're heavily skewed towards technology jobs. If you notice now, jobs such as AI engineers, artificial intelligence engineers, data scientists, there's a huge demand for these jobs. But when you look at the talent pool available in the market, it's very hard to source these candidates. In effect, it drives their salary rates up, and it's quite a lucrative career. So again, rather than focus on reskilling professionals, I think the in order to effect change massively, there needs to be widespread adoption of these emerging technology curriculums in schools. Okay, the third one is intelligent environments. So I think the key point I wanted to highlight here is the importance for security and data. So data is the new currency, and because of this, there's a huge importance for schools to actually think about, how can we ensure that our students' data or our school's data is not compromised, is protected from cybersecurity threats. Do you have the right tools in place to ensure top security? Others would be around the learning environments. Are you still stuck with the normal, uh, teacher-student relationship wherein the teacher's in front and then the students are, in their desks? So a lot of schools are starting to rethink whether or not that is the best approach, or is it time to change to a more modern time? The last one is technology blueprint. So I tackled this a bit earlier. So it's about thinking on, does my students have the right device for learning? Do I have the right tools in place to use to harness the data that I am gathering for business data driven insights? Do I have the right operations in place to make my enrollment more efficient? So taking all of these four buckets into consideration, leadership and policy, ensuring that we are up to date in terms of curriculum and modern teaching and learning, intelligent and environments, and technology blueprint. These are the ingredients of success for schools to successfully implement a digital transformation strategy. It's an overview. Usually we do it with schools for a whole day session workshop, and it's not done in a one time big time approach. It's done in a phased approach where we identify milestones, key deliverables, and align it to the school's goals and objectives. So that's just a key framework that you need to keep in mind in terms of when you're crafting your own digital transformation strategy. It's more than simply buying a device, but actually taking a bird's eye view and you know looking at it as at a holistic approach. So moving forward, there's a huge demand for remote learning. But what I want to emphasize is it's more than simply doing a virtual class and me talking in front of you. It's about how can you recreate the classroom setting in a virtual environment, right? So still having that level of engagement with students, being able to quickly give feedback to your students, grade them, keep them engaged. So I think the mindset shift, especially when implementing remote learning or distance education, is unlike in the past wherein you had an hour or not hour 30 to talk about your subject. given the virtual setting, it's very hard to keep the attention span of your students, especially if you're dealing with the younger audience. So the best practice is really think about, what is the key message that I want to get across to my students, and is there a way to actually filter that to make my lesson shorter? So one of the few things that schools need to consider apart from the right tools and technology is also about the students' emotional needs, because what we noticed is a lot of schools may not have the same environment conducive for education. So as an educator, we also must take into consideration various factors in implementing remote learning. Does my student have a device? Do they have the right learning environment at home? Do they have the right connectivity? So it's just some criterias or considerations to be thought about. So when you talk about remote learning, two words come to mind: synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous is the live session that we're doing today. We gather at specific point in time and talk as if we're um, in the four walls of the classroom. And the second one is about asynchronous learning. This is more self-paced, wherein students can simply, revisit the lessons at a later point in time. The common question is, what is better, one over the other? Actually, the quick and fast answer is it depends. Depends on your learning environment, your student profile. So there's no one approach better over the other, but rather it shifts depending on your current environment. So common best practices for synchronous session is, they say, depending on the student's age, that would be the ideal time allocated for uninterrupted sessions, one sitting. So if it's 20 years old, 20 minutes and whatnot. So take regular pauses. Although I'm not practicing that now, but ideally you'd take pause to ask questions. Try to keep it engaging. There are a lot of tools out there that you can gamify the engagements. Other session tips in terms of asynchronous session or self-paced learning is, if you had a 30-minute recording, probably you could break it down into 15 minutes and then embed quizzes, short quizzes, checkpoints, just to get a temperature check for the students. So I'll skip that and go through Microsoft Teams. That's the first part, more of discussing the why, the trends. But the second half of my talk would basically give you a demonstration in terms of Microsoft Teams. But rather than the features, I'll show you a live demo. Before I show you the demo, I just want to talk about impact. So I'm very proud of this project that Microsoft has been a part of. Last month or a few weeks ago, you know, given that a lot of schools were conducting graduations, and graduation is actually, student graduation is more than a single day event, but a time for students or teachers to recognize the milestones and achievements of students. And this was, government has announced that all classes or all graduation ceremonies will be put on hold to avoid the risk of the pandemic spreading. So Microsoft saw this as a opportunity for us to help schools, continue this historic tradition and host it in a virtual setting. So a few weeks ago, we partnered with the Department of Education to launch virtual graduation in a box kit. And in Region 11, DepEd Region 11, they were able to hold a virtual graduation in an online setting. Video recording message from Secretary Briones. They had their own, march together with their parents, all in a virtual setting. So again, the thing I wanted to highlight is um, these external threats, these pandemics such as like this, is rather than view it as complete, hindrance for us continuing education. It's an opportunity for us as well to rethink different delivery methods. and tapping technology to actually continue certain ceremonies and classes. So this is one great example of how technology was used to continue graduation in a virtual setting. So I will talk about teams. The difference of teams. The main difference of teams basically is, there's one hub from teaching and learning, faculty and staff coordination, professional development. It all hosts everything in one application, make it easy for students and teachers. So from calls, chats, productivity apps, integrating to your third-party tools, and gamifying it through Kahoot, Flipgrid, and whatnot, it's indeed possible. And the great thing about this is it works across platforms. So regardless kung desktop ba yan, tablet, iOS, Android, Windows, it can work. So with that, I'll give a quick demo on Microsoft Teams. There's a lot of things that you can do, but I filtered it into 4 key areas or topics that I can discuss. So it's hosting a virtual class, personalizing learning experience of students, creating assessments and insights on digital activity. So this is the site of Microsoft Teams. If you notice, I'm only using a browser, but you have the option as well to download the app and view it or open it in the app. So I'll show you how to host a virtual class, because day in a life, if this were to continue, very important for a teacher to actually host a virtual class, host a class in a virtual setting. So this is a calendar which is given to each and every individual of the school. And if you wanted to host a virtual class, it's very simple. You simply select a date and time that you'd want to host a class. So for example, if I wanted to host a class from 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. on Friday, I simply click and drag that. And the great thing about this is it's also available for massive events. Up to 10,000 people, you can have a live event session. So if I'm not mistaken, I think it also was increased to 100,000, but let me verify that. So far, it's 10,000. So I'll show you how to host a virtual class. You simply select the date and time that you'd want to host it in by clicking there. You put a title, for example, math class, grade 1. You add your attendees. I can add my attendees, Adele, Alex. I can identify the date it starts and the time it starts and ends. So if I want to make it a 1-hour class, I can make it all day. I can make it daily, weekly. I can add an entire channel if I wanted to. Rather than add individual students, I can add an entire channel. For example, algebra class. By default, there's an online meeting to join via Microsoft Teams. So if I wanted to have a face-to-face event, I could type it here. And of course, details. Hello, class. See you tomorrow. On Friday, rather. On Friday. And then I click send. But before sending, I think one of the common challenges that teachers encounter is identifying whether or not is my student free during that time. So rather than have to ask them individually, what you can do is look at their calendar using scheduling assistant. So scheduling assistant, if you notice, there's various blocks available. So from a solid colored shade block, that means that that person has a class or meeting during that time. If it's shaded in partially shaded, that means it's a tentative schedule. And luckily, from my chosen time slot, 11 to 12, he or she is free. So I could simply click send. So um, when I send, they would receive an email as well as their calendar would be updated. To save time, for example, this finance class 101, this is how it would look like. They simply click the event on their calendar and they see the details. If they have an email, they simply receive the email and they can join Teams meeting. So let's give it a try. I click join. Again, before joining, you'll be asked whether or not you want to share your webcam, turn on your mic. For now, I'll put that on mute and click join. So as easy as that, I was able to organize a class, but specific to the classroom requirements of teachers, one of the biggest things you need to check, right, is who is present, who are invited. Based on here, there are suggestions of who I invited, who are currently in the meeting, and who are still yet to join. But to save time, attendance is definitely a need. So you could simply download the attendance by clicking this download attendance list. And then you will be able to see a timesheet of what time a student logged in, logged out, and whatnot. So you can also manage permissions. If you want to block students from presenting, muting you, and whatnot, you can configure them as only attendees. So another feature I wanted to highlight is the raise hand feature. So for example, you want to handle student participation. You can ask students to raise their hand, and then you would be notified. You'd see an icon, a yellow hand icon beside their picture or name, signaling that they want to participate. Other methods is you can actually ask them to, type in their questions in the chat box, which you can go back to after that. And then you can record the entire session. So if you want to conduct an asynchronous lesson, you could simply record that. You can also turn off incoming video if bandwidth is an issue and ang dami kasing naka-on na webcam which consumes bandwidth. You can turn that off for everyone. And as well as you can even mute everyone if you want to. So there's a lot of controlled features in hosting a virtual class. Right? So I'll end that. I can even share my screen, similar to what we're doing now. I can share my desktop. I can share my PowerPoint presentation. I can even do a whiteboard session. So, for example, loading whiteboard. So if I'm a visual teacher and I want to, write down everything for my class to visually understand. If you notice here, there's a virtual whiteboard recreating the classroom experience of having a blackboard ready. So in a matter of seconds, you could simply write down hello. Ayan. So again, recreating the session in a virtual setting. So that's hosting virtual classes. I'll leave it there. Next thing I wanted to highlight is being able to personalize the learning experience. So, for example, this is my classes that I am included in. So, by clicking physical science, I have multiple tabs here. But if I wanted to personalize the learning experience, I simply go here to class notebook, and think of it as your digital notebook. Rather than have your physical notebook, take down notes, I can simply, have a shared class notebook across the entire class. So if you noticed here, there's multiple selections from collaboration space. Collaboration space is more on if I wanted to host a shared notebook across the entire class wherein they could contribute to the lesson. I can also have a content library. Ibig sabihin ng content library, if I want to have content that is non-editable, that students can simply view for their own reference and whatnot. But what I wanted to highlight is, again, the personalized learning experience. So for example, there's a lot of students here, right? So what I can do is create notebooks per student and personalize my approach to them. So for example, Adele Vance, one of my students, I gave her additional homework for photosynthesis. So if you noticed, it's easy for me as a teacher to give real-time feedback. I can type in my draw my comments. This is the photosynthesis process. I can give in stickers, write my comments, and even record an audio recording for that student. walking him or her through my comments to her work. I can dictate, dictate. Basically, I would read it aloud. So, for example, I highlight this, right? I highlight this text. There's what we call immersive reader in Microsoft Teams. It actually enhances the learning experience. So over the past few years, we identified that each student may have different learning styles. Some may be more visual, auditory. So with Teams embedded, you can actually read the entire highlighted text aloud. So for example, I click play.
Starch granules. The food made by the chloroplasts. 1 + 1 = cytoplasm.
So you get the point, right? So basically, within the tool, you can have the system read the document aloud to you. And it's highly customizable from size of the font, the style of the font, contrast. If you have younger learners, you can actually, change the nouns to be highlighted in purple and whatnot. And we even, it's even we give high emphasis for accessibility. So for you to, better visualize the word being said, there's actually picture guides. And you can even translate it to Filipino, for example. Our native tongue, Filipino. Ayan, Filipino. So the entire document can be converted into the language of preference. For the K-pop fans out there, you can even convert it into Korean and have it read aloud to you in Korean.
전분 과립. 엽록소에 의해 만들어진 음식.
So, we live in a multicultural country, right? So it's also important that we cater to different learning, different nationalities, learning preference of students. So that's all possible with Microsoft Teams. Again, I can note down, give my feedback instantly to my students. Students can have the entire reading read aloud to them. If I'm a teacher, I can, distribute the entire notebook. If I have content I want to share to my student, I can easily distribute it. I can review student work. So if I had homework, I wanted to check one by one rather than navigate one by one. There's an automated way of doing that. I can simply select the different lessons that I'd want to grade, and then I could walk through the different homework of each student. So that's how to personalize the learning approach. The third thing I wanted to highlight was being able to make assessments, right? So it's very important for schools, students, and teachers to properly assess whether or not a student is actually learning the lesson. So by simply clicking this assignment tab, you can click create, and then you can create from an existing template, a quiz, or an assignment. So for assignment, this is how it looks like. I enter the title, the instructions, please submit today, end of day. I submit points. How many points would I allocate to that? I can even add rubrics. So if I want a more qualitative approach, a letter grade, for example, I could identify the judging criteria and even have a blended approach for putting weights depending on the rubric. I can identify submitting to an entire class or submitting to individual students only. I can identify a due date and a specific time that this is actually due for submission. So for example, the student's view, this is a teacher's view. I would be able to see who turned in, easily give my feedback, grade that student. And this is how it looks for a student. I see the title, the number of points available, the instructions, and I can access the quiz right inside my Microsoft Teams. So I could simply check the answer, type in my answer, and click submit. And it works regardless of what platform. If I'm using a desktop computer or mobile, I can still answer it on the go. So, it's very accessible. Exam making and exam taking is made very easy. And everything that I created here is summarized in a tabular format here in the grade section. So if you noticed, all of my students are written here in the left-hand column, and all of my grades that I have done grading are also reflecting here. And I can simply export that into Excel if I wanted to transport it into my grading platform. So that's I talked about, personalized learning, creating a virtual class. Next thing I wanted to highlight is insights. So being able to monitor student digital activity. So I'll click up, this is my last presentation. I'll show you a quick video. Let me know if you don't hear it.
What's happening in my classroom? So all these insights, I'll walk through. We have digital activity. This shows all the things happening for the students in my class. And you can see, I can hover and see what's happening, editing a file, having conversations. And it's really easy to hover and see the different things that were happening. So seeing that digital activity is really important during distance learning. I can click on average grade, and you can see here the average across the class, and I can highlight and I can check the average score on these different assignments that I've distributed. And I can go on-time assignments. Well, it looks like only 9% of people turned in their assignments. There were some that were late and many that were missing. Average time for feedback. Am I giving feedback very quickly? I can see that. And then communication activity. This is really helpful, especially during distance learning. I can see who was communicating with messages and posts. So over here, it looks like Omar had the most communication going on activity in the class, but it's really nice to be able to just see what was happening. And I can look across all channels, or I can even filter on a certain channel, like the general channel. Now, something else that's interesting, I can filter on a student. So I'm dropping down the students, and let's just filter on Ella. Now it just pulls up Ella and all of her digital activities, and I can highlight and see what's happening just with Ella. She worked on the rainforest document, so I can see that there's things happening. And again, I can filter even down to communication files or assignments. I can see the average grade for Ella. I can look at on-time assignments and all those other same things, but on a very specific student. Now, exporting to Excel, you might want to have a chance to be able to export all of these things to a spreadsheet and do even more pivots. But the way it is now, being able to pivot by different student or activity and even by different dates is really powerful insights in your classroom.
Okay, that was a short video on Microsoft Teams Insights. So there's a lot more things that you can actually do with Microsoft Teams for education, but I think I'm out of time. But if I were to, summarize everything I discussed, it's more than simply a video conferencing tool, but from hosting a virtual class, conducting student assessment, personalized learning for each individual student, monitoring their digital activity. So all of that can be done within Microsoft Teams without having to leave or manage multiple applications. I think that's the true value of Microsoft Teams. And if you are used to using an education application already, you can actually integrate it with or connect it within Microsoft Teams. So on a final note, we're giving it free for schools. Everything I discussed, it's free, no cost, no commitment, no expiration. We can actually even help with the deployment remotely through our fast track support. So it gives you email, it gives you Microsoft Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. But again, the free version is only the online capable. So if you want the offline capability, that's where we can discuss further. You could simply check out, aka.ms/officeeducation.com or email me at paulobal@microsoft.com. So thank you. That ends my talk. Maraming salamat. I think I'd want to end with the quote of the mission of Microsoft Education, which is to empower each and every student and teacher to create the world of tomorrow. So I think I applaud, the educators listening in. I think you play a really important role in shaping the future leaders of our country. So maraming salamat, and thank you again, Computing Society of the Philippines, for having me. Salamat and have a great day.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Balinas. So for that very informative talk on the capability of Microsoft Teams in distance learning. So to our attendees, if you have any question, also to our panelists, if you want to forward any question or comment, you may do so. So we have some questions appearing in our chat box. So from Miss Melanie Unida, does Microsoft have offline resources for areas without digital resources, or perhaps a weak digital resources, which is prevalent in the Philippines?
Okay, so currently, the way you could deal with offline need, right, is you can actually, for example, if a teacher posts a Word document or PowerPoint slide, you could simply download that and then access it even without an internet connectivity.
Mhm.
So that's like the workaround that you can actually do um, in case you don't have internet connectivity. But just to give an idea, it's pretty lightweight. The connectivity that I'm using now is only mobile internet. So hopefully you didn't experience any lag. But yeah, in terms of the bandwidth availability, it can work even in using your mobile plan.
Okay, so this is more in line with the asynchronous education, right?
Yes, correct. Asynchronous. Their own self-paced, diba?
Mm-hmm. And will it require a lot of data to download?
Depends. To download the file, it depends on the size of the file. So for example, you have a 1 MB file. So that would be the consumption. Yeah.
Okay. Are students required to have email accounts to access Microsoft Teams?
Yes, they're required to have an email account. So the good thing about that is, at the very minimum, we provide it for free. Dun sa aka.ms/office education. A school can log in there, sign up their credentials, and then gain access to the entire, all the features that I said earlier for free, as long as you have a .edu domain. So kung naka .edu domain kayo, it's gonna be asked there in the sign-up sheet, and then you'll be able to gain access to all of the features I said earlier.
So that question was given by Ms. Ruby Ann Rodrigo. Another question here is from Mr. Meljon Cortez. Does the MS Teams feature data analytics in terms of predicting performance?
So the closest thing that na built in within Microsoft Teams na some level of data analytics is, I don't know if yung naabutan mo yung data insights feature. So that's a built-in feature ng Microsoft Teams. You're able to analyze yung student performance, kung how long ina-access niya yung specific file, what files are they accessing, ano yung average grade niya across different classes. So from there, you have a bird's eye view kung ano yung performance ng students and likelihood that he or she will pass based on past performance. So data insights, it's built in within Microsoft Teams.
Okay, a very interesting question from Mr. Kayan Agravante. How can we avoid cheating in the quiz setup of MS Teams? Is that possible? Some measure on preventing like online cheating. So while they're answering, they have online access to some site. Is there some control on this?
Built in within Microsoft Teams, there's no what do you call this? We are not able to block, for example, them access to certain websites. But we have a different tool, Intune, for example, that can configure the student access to certain sites. But built in within Teams, the closest answer to that is how to avoid cheating is you're able to shuffle the questions. That's one, shuffle questions. Second is it's integratable with Turnitin. So if you're familiar with Turnitin software, anti-plagiarism, there's built-in connection points or integration points with Microsoft Teams and Turnitin. So shuffling and Turnitin.
Okay, so I think that also answers the follow-up question of Mr. Kayan Agravante with respect to anti-plagiarism detection outputs. Is there a, uh, limited time feature for teams with respect to quizzes? Like you can do this quiz only at the starting time and this end time.
Yes. So it depends on ano yung gusto ng faculty. For example, you can set how long, kailan end yung quizzing period. You could you can opt to have it open or have a hard cutoff wherein the system closes out na you won't accept any more submissions. So it's highly customizable, yes.
Mhm. And then is there a way for this? This is from Mr. Melvin Cortez. Is there a way that the students can extend the deadline? They can ask for extension of deadlines in terms of assignments and readings, which is the usual happenings.
Yeah. So discretion ng school, ng faculty yun. But in terms of the feature, kayang gawin ng teacher yun. They can edit it. But the call
Mhm.
would come from the educator kung i-extend niya ba. Which is I think common yung request. Ako guilty ako
Mhm.
dun ng student ako.
Lagi yan. Okay, and can we do for the synchronous education? Can we also conduct live videos, live lecture videos with students watching and participating and comment? I think you already showed that feature earlier, right?
Yes, yes. It's highly possible. So you could do it both ways. Kumbaga may synchronous live session. At the same time, nire-record ninyo. And when you record, you can save it. It's automatically saved that you can reshare at a later date. So
Okay. So from Miss Erica Galia, is there some minimum specifications for the laptop or mobile phone so that we can use MS Teams?
as long as you have access to a browser, you can log into your credentials, you should be fine.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm down, looking down. Can we use MS Teams for Canvas from Miss Melissa Pantig?
Great question. So Microsoft launched a partnership with Canvas. So it can go both ways. Canvas can be connected to Teams and Teams can be connected to Canvas. So for example, some schools, not sure if I can disclose the name, but basically gamit nila Canvas. And then I think they connected Microsoft Teams for the virtual classes feature. So they use Microsoft Teams to host their virtual class. Yung kaninang pinakita ko, diba? They integrated it. So yes, there are integration points. I can share the documentation kung paano, and it's pretty straightforward and it's possible. Yes.
Okay, and I think let's have two more questions. One from Miss Ruby Ann Rodrigo. Can you customize the grading system in Microsoft Teams?
Yes. So you can create your either a point system or you want a rubric system. If you want a letter grade or excellent, good, very good, and assign weights to it. So you can customize it and determine kung ano yung variables or ano yung criteria depending on your desired grade. So yes, pwede po ma'am.
Okay, and hindi ko alam kung ano itong question ni Mr. Ray De Leon. I'm not familiar with the acronym. Is Microsoft Teams SCORM compatible? SCORM. Perhaps you're familiar
Yes.
with that.
So for connecting it to other applications, it is. Yes.
Okay. So
So
thank you.
I think I owe you may nag-message dito na integration, how to integrate. So I'll send you the link right after this, so at least you could use it for later reference.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and for giving us your knowledge on how to use Microsoft Teams in our distance learning. Okay, which is it's becoming the new method for learning in education systems. Okay,
Salamat.
so thank you very much, Mr. Paulo Balinas, for that talk and also for our participants for your attention. So if you want to review a copy of this presentation, you may find this in the same Zoom link that you have. You can review that here, or you can follow the Computing Society of the